This episode is brought to you by Indie Film Hustle Academy, where filmmakers and screenwriters go to learn from top Hollywood industry professionals. Learn more at ifhacademy.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Alec Trachtenberg, man. How you doing, Alec?
Good. How you doing?
I'm as good as I can be in this crazy mixed-up world we live in. And getting crazier by the second. I'm excited to have you on the show, man. You reached out to me last year. Thank you for your patience. You reached out to me last year about your new book, the name Lights, Camera, Sell. How to actually selling techniques and sales techniques in the filmmaking world, which is, like I was saying earlier, sacrilege. You don't talk about salesmanship in art and filmmaking. I'm an artist. I don't have to think about money and sales. That's somebody else's problem. That's what most filmmakers think, which is to their detriment. As we were talking, both The Rise of the Film Entrepreneur and Lights, Camera, Sell are great companion pieces because they both go into very different. I mean, a lot of the stuff that you talk about in Lights, Camera, Sell could easily be applied to the Film Entrepreneur method and vice versa. So I think they're really great companion pieces. But before we get started, man, how did you get into the business?
Yeah, so it's funny. I actually, when I went to college, I went to Loyola Marymount, which is a pretty big film school, but I actually didn't major in film. I majored in communication studies. Did some short films on the side. I've always had an interest for producing. And then eventually I produced a feature film called The Cabin, with my director, who's from Sweden. So it was a little indie film we shot out in Sweden back in 2017. It got picked up on distribution domestically, and they're also representing us internationally as well. But yeah, got the film on to Amazon, Hulu, all the different sites up there. And, I've always had a passion for film, but I also, just working in sales myself. I'm working at a variety of companies, that help companies like Airbnb, Amazon, in kind of, driving more sales and awareness about their products. I saw there was a huge overlap in, what I was doing as a film producer and what I was doing in sales as my day job.
Very cool. And then you decided to write the book Lights, Camera, Sell, which is, I'm assuming you saw a hole in the marketplace for a sales book in independent filmmaking. And it's not only sales of movies, but it's also sales of yourself as a filmmaker, a company, your career, and your projects, and a script, whatever, any kind. And that's the thing that people don't understand. Please let me know what you think. Is people don't understand that sales is in our lives every day, all the time. It's not just the weaselly guy selling a used car somewhere. I mean, it's sales of like, what are we having for dinner tonight? You've got to sell what you want, and you got to talking like, oh, I want to go to this place. Well, it's constant throughout the life, and I kind of figured that out early on when I was even trying to date girls in high school. I'm like, it was a sales presentation. I had to prospect. I had to provide value. I'm like, if you go out on a date with me, you will get this and this, and look at how cool I am. All this kind of sales techniques I was doing instinctively back then. But now as an adult, I kind of realized what I was doing. So do you agree with all that?
Oh, I totally do. I mean, in every aspect of your life, whether, you have a child and you're trying to convince your child to behave in a public space, or, like you mentioned, dating. I mean, Tinder is like a prospecting platform. I mean, when you're going on these websites and trying to find your best match, and you're trying to demonstrate value by the photos you post and the things that you say. Sales presentations are those dates in themselves, right? When you're going out and, you're showing what you can provide, right? So, yeah, I mean, sales is such an important aspect of everything that you want to, be able to do and accomplish in the world.
Yeah, and even as a filmmaker, when you're on set, it's sales all the time. If you're a DP, you're trying to sell your shot to the director. If you're a director, You're trying to sell your vision for the film to the actors and to the crew, and working with, like, it's, unless you're a dictator, and then that generally doesn't work out very well. But you're generally always selling, like ABC, always be closing. Yeah, that was from Glenn Cleric and Ross. But you're always selling. Oh, such a
And
great
it's
movie.
funny, you kind of harped on that idea with the used car salesman. I mean, there's so many negative connotations towards the word sales. And I think a lot of artists and, people in the film community don't really want to align themselves with that type of, personality or role, right? Because, usually when you think of sales, you think of being pushy or aggressive. People, tend to say, that's not for me. I don't do that, right?
What
But,
deceitful, like being deceitful and things like that, like a used car salesman, right? To screw you over.
But at the end of the day, sales is really all about understanding value and finding common connection with another person and figuring out ways that both parties can work together for the benefit, right? You if you're an artist and you have amazing scripts, so like if you're a writer, right? I mean, you're providing value to a production company who would love your projects to be able to produce them and put them out into the world. But it's how you convey that and how you communicate it is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I used to, when I first launched Indie Film Hustle, I would get some slack from some of my contemporaries because they just saw my unrelenting just sales, constantly marketing and promotions and just pushing and pushing and pushing. But I felt that I had a strong value proposition. I felt that like I'm providing a value. I'm giving away 95% of what I do on a daily basis. So it's not even like I'm selling. I need you to give me my money. No, I want to help. And I wanted to get that information out there as much as possible. And I still do that to this day. And it's been helpful, and it's helped me grow Indie Film Hustle to where it is. But a lot of other creatives, they don't have that they have that same kind of block that you're talking about. Whereas like I don't want to be associated with sales or snake oil salesman, which is literally one of the origins of the bad sales. The guy that comes into town, tells you a whole bunch of lies, steals your money, and sells you like whatever oil to drink to get rid of cancer, whatever that is. And I get it. And movies have not helped, by the way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I can name so many movies out there that, portray salespeople not to be the greatest people in the world.
Right. They're a great villain. But I think I think people in general are starting to come around to the idea that sales is an integral part, and it doesn't have to be dirty. It doesn't have to be sleazy. It actually is all about providing value and convincing people that have a problem and serving that, convincing people that like, if you have a problem, what I'm proposing could help you. And that's across all business. In regards to getting a job, in a job interview, you're sales. You're in sales in a job interview.
Yeah, same thing. You could be the greatest director in the world, but if you go in, with that conversation to that producer or that agent, and you don't, communicate that or build that rapport, it's gonna be lost talent. And nothing is worse than wasted talent.
Oh God, I know, and I see it all the time in my line of work where I talk to a lot of these great artists. That I see some great movies. I'm like, but you're not gonna. They didn't get the sales aspect. They don't get the marketing and promotions aspect of it. In your book, you have two great kind of explanations of sales and how important it is to filmmakers. Can you talk about the Robert Rodriguez example and the Quentin Tarantino example in your book?
Yeah. So Robert Rodriguez, is actually his father was in sales.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah. Yep. And so for him, he didn't have any sort of, blockings to him being able to go out there and make a film if he wanted to make one. Right. So, he built rapport with, the people around his community, like, friends, and really kind of just grassroots went up there and made, a feature film. Right. And, it was like, I think it was like $7,000. Mm-hmm. And he went out and talked to a bunch of distribution companies, put it out into festivals, really, just spearheaded that whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. Same with Quentin Tarantino. So his producer, Lawrence Bender, if it wasn't for Lawrence Bender to be able to see that talent in Quentin's ability to write, he wouldn't have posed the question of him to direct, right? So he directed Reservoir Dogs, which was an unbelievable movie, right? It really set the platform for, his directing career, as not only just an amazing writer, but as somebody who can also, direct like a film. So, being able to sell these ideas, even Steven Spielberg too. I mean, I have an example where Steven Spielberg would just go on the Universal tours, and then he would, I highly recommend you don't do this anymore, but if you would like jump off the tram and then went to one of the buildings of where all the producers are hanging out, and he would just confidently sell them as if he belonged there, right? And then before you know it, I mean, he got introduced to Sin Sheinberg, who was the head of Universal at the time and like president, and at that point, that's kind of where the launch was. And if he didn't have that kind of ability to build rapport and be aggressive to chase his dreams, I mean, we wouldn't be able to see E.T. or Jaws or other amazing movies he's made. So.
Now, what is the sales mindset?
So the sales mindset is really understanding that the value that you can bring to other people, but not only that, being able to know how to communicate that value, right? So, in terms of understanding like social cues, right, and like understanding like what, like for example, if there was a producer right in front of you, like in the coffee shop, right, like you wouldn't want to go up to the guy and start hounding him and start selling, pitching ideas, right? Like there's a way to really do it strategically, where you set up an email to him or somebody, get a referral, find a way like to build it, like get in on the right foot, as opposed to just being random and not really having any kind of backdrop to what you're saying.
Isn't it amazing how people online and in person will walk up to somebody who, and it's happened to me anytime I'm out in a festival or a market or something like that. I always get this to happen to me, and many of my guests have as well, where you have a filmmaker or somebody come up and go, "Hey, read my script. Hey, watch my trailer. Watch my movie. How can you help me?" And it's kind of like this, like energy suckers, I call them, because it's just like, what can you do for me, me, as opposed to providing value. And, exactly. and what can I do for you? And how do you build that relationship before you start asking for stuff? And it's trying to be authentic too, because I don't know about you, but my radar is pretty honed now for authentic relationships and non-authentic relationships. And sometimes the non-authentic relationships are fine if there's an equal exchange of value and it's a business transaction at that point. But if you're actually trying to build a rapport with somebody to truly try to help them with nothing in return, and maybe a year, I mean, I've built relationships that I never asked for anything 3 years down the line, maybe 4 years down the line. And we actually built a real relationship. And then when I call them, like, "Hey dude, can you help me with this or that?" They're like, "Of course, man. After everything you've given me, of course I'll reciprocate." So can you talk a little bit about that approach, which is it's the equivalent of walking up to a pretty girl at a bar and like, "You and I are going to go sleep together right now. Just let's get in the car." That's not going to work. That generally doesn't work. Doesn't work. And you'll probably get someone called upon you, bouncer or police.
So what they call in sales is the qualification process, right? So in the first stage of sales, it's considered prospecting, and that's trying to locate, the ideal buyer, the ideal person that's perfect for your service or your project. So doing research is really imperative. I mean, now that we live in like the digital age where any information you need is at your fingertips. I mean, you can type in someone's name on Google and find something on page 7 that you never would have known about, right? And like really understanding their background, seeing like trying to find like trends in terms of like projects that they've worked on in the past, right? What they might be interested in. Paying attention to those things, and then when you're in those conversations in that prospecting phase and you're qualifying them, like say things like, "Oh, I noticed that the last 3 films that you've worked on have all been comedies. It seems like comedy is something that's interesting in you. What's your favorite type of comedy, right?" And then from there, as a writer, you can really try to understand, okay, maybe this producer is more interested in this type of material. So you're not trying to sell him something that isn't going to fit that box, right? So really trying to understand what value you can bring to what he's looking at or she's looking at the moment.
Now, how do you eliminate wasting time on people who do not benefit from the value that you have in a project or service that you're trying to give?
So you're saying so what do you mean by that? Like
eliminating wasted time. So like a perfect example, I think you kind of talk about it a little bit, but it's kind of like doing a shotgun email to 500 producers because you find their email lists on IMDb somewhere, and you're sending comedy spots to, Jason Blum. Like it doesn't.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah. I've gotten those before.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like understanding, having like a target of just a few that you've done really hardcore research on. I'm talking like looked at, their LinkedIn, their IMDb profile, saw connections. Maybe you have a connection, common connection that you can reach out to that can maybe, introduce you in a warm way as opposed to just, randomly, sending mail, right? So I think it's really important to hone just to select few instead of just mass emailing, every single, person out there, because that's not going to garner the same results.
Yeah, I get emails of people asking me to produce their films and find financing for they pay, can you help me get money for my movie? I'm like, you obviously have no idea who I am,
Yeah.
what I'm capable of, because I am not your guy. Like you obviously did not do your research. Here, I get query letters. I get query letters from scripts. I'm like, hey, I want you to produce this. I'm like, no, like where in anything? It's not like I'm hidden. It's not like you can't really do much research on me. There is a ton of stuff out there if somebody really wants to do research on me, and they still don't do it. It's fascinating to me, but I guess that's just laziness.
Yeah, it's laziness, but also like when you are communicating to that person in an email sequence, like by like mentioning those personal things about that, individual you're reaching out to is really important because that's going to show them that, you really took the time to like, look them up and care about them. Right. Like, for example, Alex, if I was reaching out to you, I would say, I love listening to your podcast. Specifically, my favorite, episode was with this person. Right. And then kind of explaining, what did you benefit from, like, listening to that particular episode? That's going to show that, you're not just someone who's just randomly reached out to you who didn't really know, who you talked to and all that.
And it's so true. I'll get email letters from PR people who obviously have no idea who I am or what I do. And then I'll get emails from other PR people or filmmakers who will do exactly that. They're like, look, we've been listening to you for years, this episode, and I've done this and I've read that. And I take those, I actually take the time, if I have the time, to actually look into those more closely than a blanket, just, flat shotgun template email. It's fascinating. Now the second stage is discovery. What is discovery?
So discovery is like the time where first off, the prospecting stage, the whole goal of that is to schedule a time to be able to communicate with that decision maker, whether that be like a 30-minute, Skype call or meeting for coffee, right? It really depended on who you're talking to. For example, if you're speaking to like another DP and your director, maybe meet them up for coffee, right? But if you're talking to an executive producer, most likely you're going to be going to their office, that person's office, or meeting at a common ground. Probably everything's going to be virtual, during the pandemic. But that's the goal, is to really just get on a call with them and ask them questions. So discovery is really that where you're taking the research that you've done on this person and then asking questions about what they specifically are interested in, what are their pain points. What are their, their goals, right? And then collecting this information, you can then, connect that to, your project or service, or what you can bring to the table. But, if you go in there blindly trying to sell yourself right off the bat, then you're going to, have that used car salesman mentality, which has obviously not been effective.
Now, what advice would you give on how to vet potential prospects?
So, in the sense of just like
making sure that they're a really great match. I mean, obviously you could do research, and things like that, but even going deeper, are there any techniques that you use to vet them to make sure that you are a good match in whatever you're trying to sell them?
Yeah. So understanding like the job title of the person that you're speaking to, making sure that you're speaking to a decision maker. So, anything like for a financier, for example, Understanding if the person you're speaking to is the one that could actually write the check, or somebody who's associated with that person who, they're almost like the gatekeeper in a sense, right? They're trying to understand, what your project's about, and then they relay that information to, the key decision maker. But the issue is, the gatekeeper is not going to be able to effectively sell your project or service just as much as you can, right? So, or as better as you, right? So you really want to make sure that, you're connecting with the right person right off the bat.
How do you use discovery to vet potential film distributors? Because as you know, it's one of my favorite topics. If you want to talk about negative connotations, the sales guys, can you imagine what the connotation is with film distributors? Okay. It's horrible. So what do you do to vet potential distributors for your projects?
Yeah, so just as much as is like, if a distributor reaches out to you about your project, and I'm sure as an independent filmmaker, you're excited. You're like, oh my God, my movie.
They like me. They like me.
The world. Everyone likes me, right? But, just like in a job interview, this is just as much of an interview for them than it is for you, right? So, as you really got to make sure that it's the right opportunity and the right, company for the goals of your movie. So having a list of questions for that discovery call to really understand, what is the marketing strategy that you have in mind? What is the key demographic do you think that this would be for our film, right? Females ages 18 to 40 who are into horror movies, really kind of, understand what they think of your film and see if it aligns with what you think, right? And if they make very big promises, it's usually a very, a big red flag, I'd say. But you really want to check to see if that person's genuine, right? So the questions that you're asking in that discovery call is, most importantly, finding out if they're capable to get your film out there. Most importantly, or if they're genuine and they actually are passionate about your project, and you're not just going to be one out of, 200 films that they're going to take to Cannes next year to try to sell.
Right, exactly. And they, there's a couple of bigger independent film distributors who shall remain nameless who pump out 30 releases a month, 40 releases a month. It's impossible to show tender loving care to every one of them. It's just impossible. They're just a factory at that point. So it's always interesting. And people, filmmakers listening right now, when you do get that email, which is it's like I said, they like me. Oh my God, they like me. You feel like you've won something. A lot of times they use that to their advantage, but you really got to vet them. You really got to figure out if they're a good match. Have they seen your movie? A lot of times they haven't even seen your movie, right?
Yep. That's the biggest thing. Is what was your favorite part of the film? That's one question that you need to if you don't ask that and they don't answer that, that's hang up. Don't even continue the conversation. Because, how do you sell something that you haven't watched yourself? I mean,
it's ridiculous. But that is the world we live in with distribution. So how do you demonstrate value to a potential prospect?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to demonstrate value, as a filmmaker. So, one thing, your demo reel, for example, that's an example as something that's like a collateral that's selling your services and what you can bring to the table. Same thing with headshots, sales decks, pitch decks of a film. And making sure that, when you're creating this collateral, that is very professional looking, because, this is going to be in the hands of decision makers and buyers and, other people in the industry. And you really want to ensure that, you're putting great stuff out there that really reflect your professionalism as well.
Now, how about for screenwriters? How can screenwriters provide value?
Yeah, so for screenwriters, having those scripts, for a variety of different, genres. So, for example, if you're a comedy writer, right, and then drama, having kind of different variations there, if a producer requests it. But also, getting out there, with film festivals as well. If your film has won any screenplays, that's it's a screenplay contest. That's demonstrating value as well.
So, and as far as should you also create, pitch decks and stuff like that for screenplays, or is that overkill unless you're actually trying to produce it?
I think there's never any hurt in doing that. It's really any way that you can put a visual aspect to the project to make the buyer decision maker really kind of see it, I think is always great things. I think that's definitely recommended for sure.
And is this kind of like value based? Is this kind of like value based selling when you're
Yeah,
doing this kind of stuff?
exactly. It's like the value that you can bring them for sure.
Now, any tips on closing the deal?
So as far as closing the deal, you really want to ensure that you guys are on the same page in terms of, the project, the service, and that kind of goes in with, understanding like contracts and agreements. I mean, I would definitely recommend, not doing anything without contracts, as you can, agree. I've heard some horror stories on the podcast where, one person didn't get like a waiver for the, for physical appearance on the film, and the distribution company won't distribute it because they don't have that waiver, and then, the whole project falls apart. And hundreds and thousands of dollars go to waste. So having those agreements in place is definitely important. And yeah, what else?
Closing deals. Tips on closing the deal.
Yeah, and then as far as like the type of close, right? So there's different types of close that you can do, like assumptive closes, right? Where you assume that that they're sold on your project. Let's say you're a DP, right? And like, the producer you're speaking to, or director you're speaking to, has 3 other DPs that they're, kind of talking to. Maybe like aligning your projects and your background and your expertise and how you can bring it to the table and demonstrating that value, saying, okay, so when does shooting start, right? Like sometimes that confidence there can really help elevate you and show that, this is somebody who's really passionate and wants to work on this project.
Now, and how do you handle objections or fears of your potential prospect?
So there are different types of objections out there. Objections come from anything from like time. Let's say the person doesn't have any time to read your script, or, they're not in need of your service, right? So really understanding the type of objection that you're getting right off the bat is really critical, because then you can really, strategize on ways to combat that objection. So think of objections as very welcoming. You really want objections in the sales cycle, because objections means that they're having that kind of dance with you, right? Like if you were a lost cause, they wouldn't have even interacted with you in the first place, right? So, it's just a matter of, demonstrating that value and reconnecting to their, propositions and goals and pain points, and see how you can connect with both of them.
Now, and what is relationship success?
So relationship success is the last stage of the sales cycle. That's when the sale has been done, everything's closed, but it's actually, everyone thinks that once you close the deal, once you get the job, once you, get the girl, it's like done with, right? But really, it just starts at that point, right? So customer success is continually providing that value, and checking in with that person and making sure that you're delivering what you're what you want, right? If you're a writer working on a contract term, am I getting these edits and drafts in at the right time, right? Am I delivering on what I promised, right? Am I bringing the value to you that I've originally proposed? And then, finding ways to get referrals and, additional, maybe like upselling in a sense, right? So for example, if you're working with a particular company as a freelance, videographer or filmmaker who's making like commercial videos, right? Maybe there's a way to make additional videos for them, or, find out about their sister company that also needs video collateral as well that you can produce. So that's really what customer success is really all about.
Fascinating conversation, sir. It's always good to teach and instruct filmmakers on how to sell themselves and sell their projects, because it's so important. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
So I would say I would think of yourself as an entrepreneur. I mean, at the end of the day, the paradigm of shift of like film, just the past, 10 years, it's really a self, promotional endeavor, right? So really, think of yourself as a business and go out there and get it going, and don't wait on anyone else.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Long, that's a good question. Longest, I'd say, understanding that, what you're passionate about and, what you want to create might not align with other people, but that's okay. Because you'll find, your tribe, just like, you found your tribe of people that really, agree and are, passionate about what you're putting out into the world. And yeah, that's exactly how it'll end.
And three of your favorite films of all time.
All right. So I'd have to say I'm a big Scorsese fan. So I'd say Casino, Goodfellas, and then I'll just throw in a random funny one, Rat Race. Do you remember Rat Race?
Oh, God, yeah. I remember Rat Race. That was a while ago. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a very random. First time on the show, sir. First time Rat Race is on the show. I know that film. It's like it was a just ton of different celebrities or actors.
Goldberg, Mark, what is his name? Cuban Gooding Jr. Yeah,
everybody. Everybody. Everybody was in that thing. I remember it was a fun film if I remember correctly. And now, where can people find more about you, and how can they purchase the book?
So yeah, you could actually go to alectrachtenberg.com. So I actually consult one-to-one, with not only filmmakers but entrepreneurs on really how to establish that sales mindset and follow the 5 stages of the sales process to really get what they want, right? Whether that be a job, connections, so forth. And then my book's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It's Lights, Camera, Sell. So I'm sure I'll give you the link.
Yeah, it will be in the show notes. Alec, thank you so much for being on the show, brother. I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you.